I am getting sick. We were yelling at yesterday.
Yeah.
We're going to end up with 3,000 people.
Excellent.
I got all these people working around. Yesterday was the farmer's market and they had their big run.
Oh, women?
No, it's
No,
both.
you're in Helen.
It's some land trust. And there's too many cities together.
Is that possible?
So I was just bouncing around, introducing myself
See
while
some
they're here.
familiar faces.
We were in the honest spot. We're all my age. The challenge is going to be young people. People my age are putting this on balance. Well, as young as you. Well, I better get.
Oh, yeah, right.
You look familiar. Over the hill.
Once again,
How's he doing? He's aging fast.
what you've done. Figure it out.
everybody. We're going to get ready to get started in about 5 minutes. If you'd like to get your last drinks, any snacks you want, and take a seat, we'll get started in about 5 minutes. So do what you got to do. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We are doing our Forward Montana District 2 Congressional Candidate Forum, the Eastern Congressional District for the U.S. House of Representatives. So thanks so much to the candidates for being here. Thanks all of you for being here. And while we're so excited that you all are here, we're heartbroken by the news that State Senator and Eastern Congressional candidate Mark Sweeney has passed away. We were, of course, so excited to hear from Mark tonight about his vision for our state, Mark was a dedicated public servant and fierce lover of all Montana has to offer. Upon reflection and conversation with all the candidates up here tonight, we decided that in the spirit of Mark's dedication to democratic and electoral processes, that we would go ahead with the forum and let you all hear from these great candidates tonight. Mark was running for office because he cared about our community and he cared about Montana. And as such, we're just so honored to be in community and share space with all of you today. And honored to do this work in the wake of his memory and hope that we can all channel his energy and passion for this electoral process and for the future of our state into tonight's forum and into all that we do for each other as community members. So really appreciate it. We are going to take just a little bit of time before we get started to honor Mark's memory. And the candidates are going to, if they want to say a word, they're welcome to. And we're also going to read a family statement from Mark's family. So what Mark's family had to say is, tonight our hearts ache as we are informing family and friends of the tragic passing of Mark Sweeney, a beloved father, husband, and public servant to the people of Montana. While our sadness and despair weigh on all of us, our spirits remain bright as the twinkle in Mark's eye with our love for him. Whether he be hunting, fishing, skiing, or working on a farm or ranch, we will always treasure the enduring optimism, hope, and love that Mark brought to all of our lives and the people around him. To our extended family and so many friends throughout Montana and around the world, please understand that Mark left us with love, humor, and resilient passion to help other people. It's with great sadness but immense respect, love, and admiration for Mark Sweeney that we now live without him. We appreciate the privacy that people will extend to our family as we mourn and celebrate the life of Mark Sweeney. So thank you all so much for being here. Charles Walking Child, one of our candidates tonight, is going to give a quick prayer in honor of Mark. So go right ahead, Charles.
Can you all hear me? Wonderful. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to stand here and participate in with you, and I greatly appreciate you all attending this evening, and I hope that you would spread the word about the importance of this election. It's estimated that we'll have 53% turnout. We need more than that. But I will be saying a prayer for Mark and his family. It takes courage to get up here and run, taking time away from our families to try and make it beneficial for our children and grandchildren, and I'm sure that's what was on his mind. He could have been out fishing, he could have done other things, but he chose politics, and he chose to make the world a better place from his perspective. We're going through some trying times in this country. There's something coming that is far greater than our human mind and our human understanding. The most important thing that we have to do in this country is pray. Regardless of what denomination you are, and even if you're no denomination, prayer, acknowledgement of the beautiful Constitution and Bill of Rights that we had from 1776. There's been 11,000 amendments proposed to changing this beautiful Constitution that we have, that the rest of the world looks to us for our freedoms, our opinions, our ability to make decisions. And it's real sad that our national leaders are behaving like children. My goal is to bring prayer back into school and Congress. And this prayer is for a gentleman that devoted his life to improving our way of life, all of ours. I'd like to give thanks for this evening. I would also like to ask that you would bless Mark Sweeney and his family, that you'll build a hedge around them and protect them, that you'll anoint them from the crown of their head to the sole of their feet. I'd like to ask that they'll remember all the happy times that they shared as a family and the values and morals that he instilled within his family. And we pray that this prayer will go throughout the nation, that we as people, as God's creation, remember one another in this manner through prayer. In your name, Lord Jesus, amen.
Thank you so much, Charles. And yeah, if we just want to kind of start with you, James, and again, if you just want to offer condolences, that's totally fine. Don't feel like you need to say a lot if you didn't know Mark, but I would just love for each candidate, if you feel comfortable, to say a few words about Mark. So go right ahead.
Thank you. So I unfortunately did not have the opportunity of meeting Mark in person, and was honestly looking really forward to meeting him today. So it is very sad that he did pass away. However, I feel like every single person up here is now charged with continuing what Mark was running for. He was running to bring some peace and progress to our state, to fight for a better tomorrow for Montanans, for America. And in the Montana Farmers Union debate a little over a week ago, he made a comment of what differentiates him from Matt Rosendale. And he said, "I show up." That's more than can be said for Rosendale. And even in this time, I feel like you've got 8 candidates up here that are showing up, that are wanting to provide a better tomorrow for everyone. And I want to thank you for your time, and please keep Mark and his family in your prayers. Thank you.
You know, I also didn't have an opportunity to meet Mark, but I was hoping he'd be here tonight in person. But at the end of the day, he's here in spirit, and he's going to keep us moving forward, Montana. That's what we need to know. Thank you.
I also never had a chance to meet Mark, but I was talking with a Republican player in the state a few weeks ago about this general race, and he spoke extremely highly of Mark, and so I offer my condolences to his family.
Yeah, I'm the same. I never met Mark, but everything I've heard about him is that he was a wonderful person and a great guy in all ways. I'd like to thank Mark, his family, and this organization for remembering him. I think this is very touching, and it's a good memorial for him.
So Skylar and I did know Mark, and we had the pleasure of traveling with Mark and speaking with Mark at different forums and debates and getting to know Mark through this process. And I was just with Mark on Thursday night. And so yesterday morning the news was quite shocking. I think both Skylar and I, we were talking beforehand that one of the things that was really wonderful about our experience in the forums and the debates is that we were very friendly with one another and very supportive of one another. You know, I'll just share, and I don't know if Skylar knows this yet or not, but at the end of the debate for Western Native Voice on Thursday night, Skylar wasn't able to join us, but Mark acknowledged him, and we acknowledged both Mark and I acknowledged all of the candidates, but Mark really had nice words about Skylar, and that's who Mark was. He would, after our answers that we would give, either myself or Skylar would give, Mark would almost always say, "Oh, I agree with what Penny said," or "I agree with what Skylar says," "Oh, I support that." He was very encouraging in that way. So I just wanted to read what my statement was yesterday and share a few more words about Mark. I join Montanans as we grieve the loss of a champion of public service, Mark Sweeney. The news of Mark's sudden passing is shocking and heartbreaking. My heart holds Mark's family and loved ones close and with much compassion. Mark and I crossed paths traveling the state, meeting with people, and speaking at forums and debates. As both a colleague and competitor, Mark was supportive, friendly, and tough. He challenged all of us to care in greater ways about our state and our country. His love for Montana, our country's democracy, and our American values shined through in his dedication to public service and our electoral process. I'm deeply saddened for Mark's family. They have lost their beloved husband and father. In our grief, my heart joins with all of Montana as we embrace Mark's family with our prayers.
I did not know Mark Sweeney prior to this campaign. When I talked with him, I learned he was a state senator, and he has done a lot of work for Montana for years before I even knew about him. But a few weeks ago, we were supposed to do an event in Sydney, and unfortunately got snowed out. And my flight there got canceled, but Mark Sweeney and his campaign manager, Jim Edwards, offered to give me a ride from here all the way over to Sydney. And I was like, those guys are my favorite duo. Like out of everyone in the campaign, you guys are my favorite. And it was cool, you know, they didn't have to do that, and I didn't know Mark too well, and we've only seen each other twice before that, and he still offered a car seat for me, and I really appreciate that. I can't comfortably speak about his lifestyle, his past. I did not know him too well, but the few weeks that I did know him, he was a good man. I really liked him. I enjoyed his company. Every time we saw each other, we were joking. Him and Jim Edwards both. They always had jokes. But he will be missed, and I'm sad he's not here tonight.
I did get to know Mark. Actually, he called me a couple, 3 weeks ago, and just to compare notes about campaigning. He was in eastern Montana driving somewhere. I know a lot of his friends in western Montana, Butte and Anaconda, and I was in Helena yesterday and met a lot of his friends Friday night, and of course all of us were in a state of shock on Sunday. I send my condolences to his family, his very loyal friends, and his loyal supporters.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Again, we just want to make sure that we took the time to honor Mark if we were going to go forward with the forum tonight. So I thank you all for being in this space with us again. And with that, I would love to just thank you all for showing up, especially the candidates. I think it's such an amazing feat to have all 8 of you in one room. So I really appreciate you all for making the time. And I'd love to move into our candidate forum now and hear from all of you about your vision for our state and our country. So to get started, my name is Perry Kemick. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Billings field manager with Forward Montana. And again, we're at the Eastern District Congressional Candidate Forum. We have 8 candidates here of the 10 that are running. And we will just, I know you didn't get a chance to actually be introduced to all of them, but don't fear, you'll get to know a little bit more about them. They'll introduce themselves. And before we get started, I'd love to just take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Absalika and Northern Cheyenne peoples, as well as the common hunting grounds of many other tribal nations who continue to be stewards of this valley in the face of years of colonization and displacement. And we recognize that it's a privilege to be standing on this indigenous land today and to be holding our event here. And I would love to encourage you all to take the time to educate yourself by researching the Land Back movement. You can find information on a website called landback.org. It's right up there. If you'd like to take a photo, you're welcome to. They have additional resources and some on-demand recorded presentations about Land Back. And if you have the means, we'd love to invite you to donate to the Montana BIPOC Mutual Aid Fund on Venmo. Again, right up there at MT BIPOC Aid. And reminding people of the importance of supporting mutual aid, we hope to provide an opportunity to step away from performativity and into action and reparation. All donated funds are redistributed to BIPOC Montanans who are in need. Okay, so first of all, again, thank you so much for coming. I have immense gratitude for my Forward Montana team for helping me put this together, and for my planning committee and my moderators tonight, Julia, Karen, and Kendra. Appreciate you all so much for being here. As you've all found your seats, you should have found in either a cup holder or on your seat, there should be a note card and a pen. If you don't have one, we can absolutely get you one. But that is for you to submit audience questions throughout the night. We'll have time at the end for a couple of those. We'd love for you to submit those, ask candidates questions that you want to know. And we will, a couple staff will be walking up and down the aisles if you want to turn them in throughout the forum. And we'll have a quick announcement right before audience Q&A to make sure that you have a chance to write down your question. And here's how the whole thing's going to go. We're going to start off with a couple minutes for each candidate to give their opening statement, introduce themselves, tell you a bit about themselves, and then we're going to do our first chunk of the forum, which is a mix of long form and some fun surprise rapid response questions that the candidates don't know yet, to just kind of break it up a little bit and show you that they are real people, just like us. So yeah, we're just going to be doing questions from climate change to voting rights, all kinds of different things, to how folks like to spend their Saturday morning off or something like that. So I'm going to pass it over to Julia, who's going to do a little bit about what the heck Congress people actually do, so you know a little bit more about that, and into introductions. Thanks, Julia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to you all, and also welcome to the candidates. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Julia Maxon. I use she, her pronouns, and I've called Billings home for about the last 3 years, and also just have had the privilege of doing a lot of organizing work all across Montana and just over here in Billings. So again, I'm excited to be here and also to help organize this event with Perry, Karen, and Kendra, and of course all of Forward Montana. So before we dive into the forum, I do want to take a moment just to stress why this election is such a big deal. So for a little bit of context and background, following population increases that were reflected in the 2020 census, Montana gained back a congressional seat, creating the Western Congressional District. So, however, for the last 30 years, Montana has had only one seat in Congress after the second seat was lost in 1990 due to changes in statewide population. So, Montana is the first state in the United States history to gain back a lost seat in Congress. Woo! So prior to 2020, our lone at-large district in Montana disproportionately represented more people than any other district in the country. The new congressional seat means that all Montanans will have a more proportionally accurate vote in our elections. With this new ability to be heard and represented in electoral politics, Montanans will have more opportunity and say over policies that affect our everyday lives. So you might be asking yourself, what does a congressional representative even do? Your representative in Congress is tasked with making enormous decisions that impact your daily life. Much of the work of a congressional representative includes holding hearings, composing and authoring bills, developing and voting on legislation, appropriating the budget, attending to meetings, and perhaps most importantly, listening to the concerns from constituents like all of you. So they also help to solve important issues that impact our community, which is exactly what we're here to discuss tonight. So when you get your ballots this year for the June 7th primary, you'll get to choose which ballot to vote on to send a candidate to the general in November. Independent candidates will not appear on the primary ballot, but are required to gather a certain number of signatures by May 31st in order to appear on the general ballot in November. So to open up the forum a little bit, we're going to give each candidate 2 minutes to introduce themselves and their platform. We'll go by party so that you know who will be on each ballot. We have a lot of ground to cover tonight, so that 2-minute rule is pretty firm, and I won't be afraid to cut you off. So Erin will be sitting right up here in the front row with time paddles, so she'll kind of give you a better idea of how much time you have left. So there's a 1 minute time paddle, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and then a stop sign. So to get us started, I'll kick us off with the Republican candidates. So we'll go start at the end with Charles Walkingchild. So Charles, again, feel free to take 2 minutes and to introduce yourself.
Actually, I would like the gentleman at the end to start. It's customary. We respect our elders.
Great.
I'm good with that. Everyone else?
Take it away.
Okay. I guess the first thing I do is confess my age. I'm a spry 73. You sure I'm older than you? All right. I am running because I know I can beat Matt Rosendale. I started late. I've been concerned about the way the parties are going. I think there's a big middle in Montana. I think as I go door to door and get signatures, I find people are very tired of party politics, particularly the nasty kind. I'm a businessman. I started 43 years ago, a couple blocks from now, and own a family business. I've served half a dozen governors, both Republican and Democrat, in a variety of positions. I ran for 2 reasons. One is this concern for party politics, and one was the embarrassment of Matt Rosendale. I was upset with him about not commending Capitol Police officers when the insurrection was handled. He voted against commending police officers. He voted against a number of things against helping Ukraine. What tipped me, and I started late, I filed on the last day, was when he was one of 3 House of Representatives, including 2 that are absolutely crazy, to vote against 426 to 3 to vote against supporting Ukraine. 2 weeks ago, because I've been an independent, I get everyone's newsletter. He's still proclaiming that we shouldn't help Ukraine. And I think that's when embarrassment became shame, and I filed.
All right, so we'll move over this way and we'll start with Skylar.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. I'm Skylar Williams. I've been seated next to Gary to counteract his age. I'm 24.
3 times?
I decided to run for Congress because I have a lot of concerns with healthcare, with education, and with climate change. Those are the 3 biggest issues that I'm running on that would affect my generation and future generations the most. So I believe we need somebody in Congress that would accurately push this hard, push these subjects to everyone in Congress and the Senate and up to the president. I decided to run because we're not getting any of those things done by our current representative. I feel very poorly represented by Matt Rosendale. I don't feel his views reflect my own. There is no leeway. There is only partisanship with him. I believe a lot of other people up here would see and agree to that fact. And everyone would try and represent everyone equally rather than just one party line. So that's what inspired me to run.
All right. Thanks, Skylar. I'll toss it over to Penny.
Thank you. So I'm Penny Ronning. I served on Billings City Council for 4 years. My term ended December 31st, but that's not where my story starts. So my story starts with my mom, who was a federal employee. Her very first job was with the FBI at the age of 18. She went on to serve the Department of Navy, the Department of Army, and for the most of her career, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. My mom taught me the love and respect of government. She taught me that government is my neighbors, government's my teacher, my firefighter, the police officer, the librarian. She taught me this incredible respect for government. So in January 2020, when I was invited by the Trump administration to attend the White House Summit on Human Trafficking as the lone Montanan to represent this subject, when I got to Washington, D.C., Senator Tester's office called and asked if I wanted to do something else when I was in D.C., and that was attend the United States Senate trial of the impeachment of Donald J. Trump, and I said, yes, absolutely. How fast can I get there? So I got to this trial for 2 hours. What I saw was 13 Senate seats that were empty. 13 senators didn't even bother to show up on one of the most important days of their job. In 4 years of serving on Billings City Council, I never missed a single meeting. I never missed a single day of work for 4 years, and we show up every Monday. 13 senators didn't show up. That was moral decay in suits. 1 year later, that decay showed up waving flags and breaking down windows and killing police officers. And that's when I knew I was going to run for the United States House of Representatives.
All right. We'll move over to the Libertarian candidates, starting off with Roger.
Thank you so much, and thank you, all of you, for coming. My name is Roger Roots. I'm a Libertarian candidate for Congress. I'm a Libertarian gadfly. I frequently run for office. About every 2 years, I've been running for something over the years. A lot of people don't know about the Libertarian Party, and they don't know that even within the Libertarian Party, there's a lot of range about beliefs. We have vicious arguments amongst ourselves. I am an extreme libertarian, okay? So when I go to the Libertarian National Convention, I get into arguments. I'm at the outer end. I hate government in all forms. There's never been a good government. There never will be a good government because good government is impossible. I have great respect for her that was just talking about the wonders of government. Did you know that social science finds that Statistically speaking, the average person in the world is over four more times more likely to be killed by his own government than by any foreign government, than by any criminal, than by any terrorist. So your own government is the greatest source of danger in your life. Your own government is always the greatest source of disinformation and misinformation in your life. So I'm on the extreme outer end of libertarianism. In Congress, I will cast every vote against government. I will vote to cut taxes. If I can cut it 1%, I'll cut it 1%. I would like to see it 0%. And I will work with other members of Congress constantly to introduce bills, to work with them, to cut the size, scope, and power of government. Government is the greatest danger in our lives, and it is the greatest threat to the Western world in the next century. In fact, the entire world.
Awesome. Thanks, Roger. All right, we'll toss it over to Sam.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Sam Rankin. Congress needs to be fixed because every law and decision that comes from the Congress is tainted or corrupted by negative interest of big money, corporations, political action committees or PACs, and lobbyists. When a bill starts to be formed in DC, the big money people are out whining and dining the members that are going to be dealing with that bill, offering them campaign cash. And then they're hooked. Hooked for what? When the time comes to vote, those same members will vote with the big money interest, negative money interest, 80% of the time, while the positive interest of the people of the general public and their want or will loses 80% of the time. It's the reason we all are disgusted with Congress. There's no thing that the federal government can do due to Supreme Court decisions. It's illegal to pass any kind of moderate financial incentives now. There's only one way, and that's to elect someone like me that will not take big money during a campaign, nor while I'm in office. In 1916, Montana sent a Republican, Jeanette Rankin, to Congress to change the system. She's the first woman that was to hold federal office, and she broke the monopoly of an all-dominated Congress, and the country is better off because of it. In 2022, I'm asking you to send another Rankin to Congress to change the political system. By sending me, we will start the breakup of the monopoly of big money and its negative hold on Congress. It has to start someplace. Our country cannot afford politics as usual any longer. Vote for Sam Rankin. Thank you.
All right. So now back around to the Republican candidates. We'll start with Kyle.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kyle Austin, and I'm your next candidate, or your next United States representative. So when I'm going around Montana, I tell people there's 3 reasons you're going to vote for me. 1, I'm a farmer, been around farming agriculture for about 30 years, 30 plus years. 2nd, pharmacist. I've been around healthcare for 14 plus years. Most of you know me from Farm 406, traveled the state, got everybody vaccinated, got them tested, got Montana back on track during the pandemic. Number 3 reason people are going to vote for me, born and raised right here in Montana. Nothing comes down to it when you go to DC to have a representative that was born and raised here that knows the values of all Montanans versus someone that's from California, someone from New Jersey, someone from Maryland. That's important this next election. Why am I running? Healthcare. Healthcare means everything to everybody in the state, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Native American. We need to fix that. The problem with healthcare, insurance companies. We need to say bye-bye to the insurance companies. Second thing, agriculture. Agriculture is the backbone of this whole community. Not only does it employ people, keep people, fund our rural communities, it puts food on your tables. We need to get that fixed. We need to support our farmers. This next election, we need to put a farmer in DC. Why? The 2023 Farm Bill is just right around the corner. That's going to tell our agricultural producers what they can and can't do and fund them for the next 5 years. If we don't do that with climate change, guess what? You're not going to have food on your table. That's important. So when it comes to this June primary election, the Republican ballot is very important. Vote against Rosendale. Let's get one of these other candidates up there. Let's do something great for Montana. Let's move it forward. Let's gain some altitude. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, next we have James.
So my name is James Boyette, running on the Republican ticket. And a little bit of kind of why I'm running is for a lot of reasons. But when we take a look at everything that's going on in our state, in our country, there's this divide that is being widened by extreme viewpoints on the left and the right, and this inability to work together to actually perform the job and duties of being a representative of the people. There's a lot of very selfish congressional representatives out there. What I'd like to do is address our healthcare system. Obviously, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. Address our education system for K-12 education. Increase some of the standards, increase some of the support for our kids. Protect our public lands. Too often, public lands are being sold off and transferred from federal land, state land, then being privatized, just like the Wilkes brothers. And when we take a look at Montana, the farming ranching community, the lack of resources and support that they've been receiving is outrageous. A few years back, Montana broke into the hemp industry. That went down the tank because they didn't have the resources available to continue processing. We need to actually find solutions for Montanans, address some of these issues, and get past this partisanship and start working towards the common goal, which is the betterment of the people. Thank you.
All right, and finally we have Charles.
Well, can you hear me? My name is Charles Walkingchild. I am Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Cree, and Blackfeet. My people have a flag that's older than Congress and fought in the revolution against England and was brought into a treaty signing, the Greeneville Treaty signing. Now there's a side of America that you must know about, and that'll be brought to light as I continue running. But I wanted to say one thing. Mr. Buchanan, if you wanted to beat Rosendale, you should have hired my mama.
What's her name?
Cecilia Walkingchild. I just want to wish all the mothers out there happy Mother's Day. You ladies are special. You are God's gift. You bring life into this world. As your next candidate, you need somebody that's going to be aggressive, that's not going to be afraid to say what they're going to say. One of the things that I want to do is propose and introduce God back into our public school system, have our educational school system focus on math, science, English, and history. History so it does not repeat itself. What's going on in DC right now is what went on in Rome, the collapse of Rome. Stop and think about it. A lot of our politicians, they're bought. Rosendale is bought. He's bought and paid for. And anybody who votes for Rosendale is buying in on that big game plan. I just want you to open your eyes and realize what's coming and prepare for it. I'm up for individual rights, small farmers and ranchers, and I do appreciate this time.
Thank you so much, Charles, and thank you so much to all the candidates for taking the time to be here tonight. So I'm now going to pass it over to Kendra Woods, who will be moderating the question and answer portion of the forum.
Hi everyone, my name is Kendra Woods and I am 20 years old and I go to school here at Billings at MSUB. I'm very excited to be here with you all to learn more about the folks who have stepped up to run for office. I'm going to be leading us in a long form and rapid response questions. The candidates will have 90 seconds to respond to each of the long form questions. We do want to remind the candidates and our audience that this is a forum and not a debate. Candidates will have time to answer the questions, but not to offer a rebuttal to their opponents. Aaron, again, is sitting right here in the front row with time paddles that the candidates can see, and we will not be afraid to cut you off. For our rapid response questions, the candidates must answer as briefly as possible, nothing more than just a couple words, and we'll go in a random order each time so no one always has to go first or last. But we will again keep candidates grouped by party so that you know who is who. All right, let's get started. This first long-form question is about climate change. The most recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report stresses that we must reach peak emissions in the next 3 years and halve global emissions by 2030 if we are to avoid catastrophic warming. The report also tells us that we have all of the technology needed to achieve these targets. What federal policies and actions will you support in Congress to meet this critical moment? Let's start with the Libertarian candidates. You have 90 seconds, and start with you, Roger, and then Sam.
Okay, thank you very much. This is my issue. I love this issue. I love science. I love studying this issue. I'm the guy that actually broke the story, which was an international story a couple years ago, that the government had been, during the winter when the facilities at Glacier National Park were closed, they were quietly removing the signs that had been up there saying that the glaciers were all going to be melted by the year 2020. I'm the guy that actually wrote that story. Rush Limbaugh one morning opened with my story. So I study this a lot, and I love the science of this. What the government has been doing is not science. You mentioned the IPCC, it is not a science body. It is a governmental body. It's called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. There's nothing they've done that is really science. A true scientist calls out to the whole world to try to prove him wrong. He wants to debate. He wants to be proven wrong for the advancement of science. A true scientist never silences others. He never silences and censors questions. And I just want to show you that the government agents, the NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has actually been altering the past temperature records to make the past colder than it was measured. You see in the red line there, that's the red line is what they currently publish, and the blue line is what was actually measured. So the government agents have actually been altering the records of the temperature data. And I can tell you, when I get to Congress, I'm going to put them under oath, and I'm going to interrogate them for the first time. Thank you.
There are numerous ways to reduce the effect of climate change, and these are a few that I support. I support the SEC's requirement that publicly traded companies need to disclose their climate risk and greenhouse gas emissions so that investors can make informed decisions when buying their stock. I also favor federal help to the states to renovate the 100,000 public school buildings that we have to improve them in healthy ways for the children by upgrading HVAC, electrical, and the lighting. Along with saving money for the school boards, it'll help save the planet. Along those same lines, I also support transitioning the 500,000 yellow school buses in this country from diesel and gas to electricity. In the United States, buildings are the largest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions. They represent 35% of the total energy-related emissions. I support the National Building Performance Standards Coalition, which works with various groups to upgrade buildings focusing on energy efficiency and consists of the federal government, labor, and non-governmental agencies. The math is clear. Reducing greenhouse gas can only be achieved with significant reductions in buildings. Dealing with climate change is my #1 issue, but it has to be tempered with the reality of big dollars from entrenched interests opposing change. I believe there should be an acceptable off-ramp for the labor force in those entrenched industries, but not the executives.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our Democratic candidates. Penny, you have 90 seconds, and then Skylar.
Thank you. So we all know about large projects that are happening in regard to energy. We've had the discussions about coal. We've had the discussions about wind energy and solar. All of those things I support. But what I want to talk to you about in the 90 seconds is something that happened to me today. So I got this call from what we have in the city of Billings called an urban forester. How many here have heard about an urban forester?
Yay. Okay, almost every city has one if they're of any size. So an urban forester works with our trees. Trees are essential to climate change. One of the things we talked about today is what we can do right at the local level to enforce and impact climate change if we work on landscaping in regard to the blacktops that we see all over. Like, for example, when we look at big box stores and they have big blacktops, those blacktops radiate heat, and that heat goes into the air. What we can do is we can start right at the local level creating landscaping that has trees and boulevards, trees and blacktops, where we can create shade that lowers that asphalt level down. Those are some of the things we can do right at the local level, along with all of the big projects we're doing at the federal level. So would love to talk with any of you more about that, especially you, Christy Drake, about bike tours on trees. So remember, you can impact climate change right at the local level.
Climate change is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, especially the farmers, such as Kyle, having to deal with drought and wildfires these past 2 years. It's been horrible for them. And I would like to reference the greatest scientist, Bill Nye. No, I'm just kidding. But no, we have actual legitimate scientists testifying in front of Congress. We had one a few weeks ago who performed an act of self-immolation on the steps of Congress. This isn't somebody who does this for fun. They don't believe in conspiracies. They want people to know that this is a real issue. This is a vital issue. This is just as important as healthcare, as education. Like, none of us are going to be here if the climate freezes over, you know? We have a duty, I believe, as a species, as a people, to take care of this planet. It gives us our food. It gives us our wildlife. Everything the earth provides for all of us. And if we don't start taking care of it now, if we don't get representation to take care of it now, it's going to be too late down the road. The Green New Deal was a good start. By no means was it perfect, but we can negotiate that. We get new representation in there. We get the younger generation in there. There will be a lot more avenues we could find, a lot less corruption when it comes to Exxon bribing politicians, a lot more solar power, wind, hydroelectric, geothermal. There are a lot more avenues than just coal, oil, and gas that we need to explore, and that's what I'm going to push for in Congress.
All right, thank you to our Democratic candidates. We'll now move on to our independent candidate, Gary.
I have read the intergovernmental report on climate change, thanks to you pointing out to it in your questions. I think it's real. I think what's really important is we've rejoined international organizations after the Trump administration, and I think we should continue to be strong in that area. I do think we have an issue right now, a transition with the war in Ukraine and inflation, which I'll talk about later maybe. I think we need to drill domestically for oil. I think we do not want tanks and armored vehicles running out of gas in Ukraine, and we have a transition period. I've been given the Montana Wildlife Association Conservationist of the Year award, and the Trout Unlimited folks gave me a lifetime honorary membership because of my work on water. That's my background, has primarily been on that. But I think in Montana we probably don't have as many we probably have a few more charging stations than we do phone booths. We have a long ways to go. I like what we've done recently in the federal level of having charging stations, but we have a reality to face in a transition period to get to the demands of the intergovernmental study. I like Mr. Rankin's ideas, and I liked every one of them.
Thank you, Gary. Finally, we'll move on to our Republican candidates. James, you have 90 seconds.
Yep. So I first off agree with Gary that we do need to have a transition period. We're all seeing what happens when you immediately drop the priority around oil and gas, and our pocketbooks are paying for it. But on a local level, we have the resources to address one of those transition options, and that's biofuel, biodiesel. I touched on hemp a little bit earlier, and interesting fact is they're actually studying the use of hemp broken down and hemp seeds for actually being refined for biodiesel and hemp plants being refined for biofuel. On a little bit different kind of portion, on the ethanol production, yeah, you can get it from grain, sugar beets, anything like that, but you can also get it from the waste at landfills and create ethanol to serve as biodiesel. On a little bit different side of things, the water shortage is definitely an issue that is being faced all across Montana. And implementing some actual water reserves, water collection systems, that's something that I'm currently working on an invention for. And then the last portion is compost collection, cut down on the fertilizer plants for the materials and implement something to run alongside our trash and recycle systems to address that issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Now we'll move on to Kyle.
All right, so climate change, I agree with those thousands of scientists out there that back that study. What they say is we got to cut emissions by 45% by the year 2030. That means every 100 cars going down the interstate, 45 need to shut their keys off, pretty much. Is there a place for electric vehicles in this market? Absolutely. Where the electricity comes from, it has to be clean in order to do that. It can't come from coal, it can't come from nuclear, it has to come from solar, wind, or hydroelectric dams. We need to get after that. We can't wait. Now, for Montana, we really don't have a smog issue like the big cities, so we can put EV vehicles off a little bit, but what we should look at is our food source. So with policies in Congress with climate change, we should look at drilling springs so we can water our cattle. We should put in pipelines so we can irrigate our crops, so we can keep that food supply going while the rest of the world tries to figure it out. Why do the emissions keep going up, people? It's because the world population keeps going up. We keep consuming. Do we have the actual answer why dinosaurs became extinct? We don't, but we should learn from that and look at that so we don't become extinct ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. And finally, Charles.
Can you read the question again?
Yes. Okay. What federal policies and actions will you support in Congress? Oh, I'm sorry. That was the bolded part. It's so long. I'm trying to. Okay. The most recent intergovernmental panel on climate change report stresses that we must reach peak emissions in the next 3 years and have global emissions by 2030 if we are to avoid catastrophic warming. It also tells us that we have all of the technology needed to achieve these targets. What federal policies and actions will you support in Congress to meet this critical moment?
I don't prepare for a lot of the questions, but one of the things that we need to look at is upgrading our trans-rail system. The Department of Transportation hasn't moved. The owners of the railroads haven't moved. Imagine if we could design a trans-rail system that would transport our goods and services. It's possible that we could, I'm working with a group that did a study from Seattle to Chicago, reduce the use of diesel fuel by $5 billion, coming up with innovative ways to make that trans-rail system work. Imagine if you didn't want to drive all the way to Seattle or Chicago, you drove your car onto that trans-rail system for $18. Look how many cars would be coming off the lot. I mean, coming off the road. How much we'd be saving. It's coming up with innovative ideas and calling on the Warren Buffetts and who's the other guy that bought Google? Or was it, Elon Musk. Twitter, sorry. But that's just one way. The other way is we got to look at the geographical structure of the earth. It all has a balance, just like the mountains do. They've gutted out the Amazon. We need to restore that. That is vital to preventing global warming and change. Those are just a few ideas.
Thank you to all of our candidates. Next, we have our first rapid response. Remember to answer in 1 to 2 words maximum. What is your favorite Montana State Park? Let's start on the left with Charles and go to the right, ending with Gary.
I missed the question again. He was talking to me. I'm into it. By the way, I got an Indian name for him later. You're going to love it.
What is your favorite Montana State Park?
What is my favorite Montana State Park? Well, I'll tell you what, I have a lot of ancient stories.
1 to 2 words max.
Oh, 1 to 2 words?
Rapid
Yellowstone.
response.
Glacier.
State Park.
Why am I blanking? Drawing a blank. They got me on the federal level now. Go ahead.
Well, Devil's Elbow, I want to change that name. Throw that devil out of America.
Makoshika?
I'd say the Virginia City, the Gold Camp area, which I believe is a state park type of a place.
From Billings, I should say Lake Elmo. Did you know that it's the most visited? It's the most visited state park is Lake Elmo. But I'm gonna agree. Go with Glendive, Makoshika. Yeah.
Yellowstone.
Makocha State Park.
I like your state park. It's pretty cool.
Thank you, everyone. For our next long-form question, which is about housing in Montana, the American Rescue Plan Act allocated $50 million in federal funding to the Montana Housing Assistance Fund to support Montanans. But despite this assistance, housing and rental prices are still on the rise in Montana. What can Congress do to support affordable housing and mitigate the housing crisis, and what does equitable housing mean to you? This time, let's start with our Democratic candidates. Skylar, you have 90 seconds, and then Penny.
So a lot of the rising house prices I've had to deal with personally. This last month, my rent went up an extra $700. And yeah, that's why I was absent from a few events. I was moving. But a lot of this is caused by the 4 biggest states buying property in Montana is California, Texas, Florida, and New York. When the COVID pandemic hit, I saw a lot of people who owned Airbnb houses just crying out for help, and I gotta be honest, I had no sympathy. These are people who buy houses to make money versus people like us who buy houses and to be homes, to live in. We're not trying to make a dollar off of these. We're trying to settle down. We're trying to live our life. A lot of these companies buying up property here, we should be introducing new taxes against them. If you own a property here in Montana and you're based out of state, you should be paying more in taxes versus somebody who actually lives here. I don't agree with a lot of just letting them buy as much property as they want. 80% of new houses built are built by companies to make rental properties. They're literally trying to rent out the American dream, and we can't afford it anymore. There's a lot of us, if I didn't have people that I know that would take me in to give me an extra home to stay at for now, I would be homeless. And I don't think a lot of people deserve that. I think everybody should be able to afford a house. And I would support legislation, federal legislation, making that possible. Thank you.
So in the past year, median household incomes in Montana rose only 4.7%, but rentals rose 15%, and homes a whopping 29%. And there are 10,000 fewer homes in Montana than we need, according to Freddie Mac. Supporting infill development in urban areas helps lower infrastructure costs. Preservation of rural housing helps avoid displacement in rural areas and low-income and workforce housing. Tax credits helps incentivize affordable housing development. These are a few of the areas that can be addressed to immediately begin promoting housing affordability in Montana. The gap between wages and housing costs needs to be addressed as well. When we first started talking about, and this was years ago when we first started talking about affordable housing, What that meant was a single-family house. I can tell you in 4 years on Billings City Council, that definition has changed. What I started seeing change was affordable housing has now become multifamily living, which means apartments. So we've moved out of single-family housing as being the affordable definition to apartments being affordable. And that's even no longer affordable, as we've heard Skylar talk about. We have to get back to closing that wage and housing gap.
Thank you to our Democratic candidates. Now we'll move on to our Republican candidates. Kyle, we'll start with you.
So unfortunately, Montana kind of got smashed in this pandemic here with the supply-demand, because everybody ran to Montana during the pandemic to get away from their problems they had out of state. And if we had a governor that stood up, he might have would have built a wall around the state and protected us from the rental and the housing market from going up. But folks, there's a lot of things that cause influx in prices, taxes. So like in Billings, the city council members, sorry Penny, they keep raising taxes, raising fees, charging people tickets. That's wrong. That needs to go the other way. We need to bring that down. Construction. A lot of construction companies have to go through the DEQ, another red tape. It costs about $30,000 for the first study to even break ground on a new apartment complex. To recoup that, those guys have to rent at a higher rate to get that money on return. Now, when the government dumps money, this is the problem. When the government dumps money, no matter what it is, housing, solar, wind, everything goes up. It's because the government's dumping money. So in Congress, we're going to stop dumping money like that. We're going to give it out wisely so we don't cause this inflation. If we see a big influx of people, guess what? We need to get those trailer parks or RV parks open so people have a cheap, inexpensive place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Charles, you have 90 seconds.
Housing is a big problem. I know about housing problems and issues. We can change that. We don't got to look to Congress. What we need to do is put it on the ballot for everybody in the state of Montana to vote against corporations buying up property for housing then renting it out. We should develop a state law that only confines them within business district towns, not urban development, not renting. It's time to get smart and utilize the law and start pushing state laws that affect us here in Montana. I'm deeply concerned for every farmer, every rancher, every one of my friends that I grew up with and their children and grandchildren not being able to afford a home. We need to put restraints on corporations. Stop and think about it. Corporations are taking over. You're losing your rights. Your children are becoming slaves. You need to be aggressive. You need to be assertive. And to be quite frank, I think you should all vote for me. I'm not afraid to say it. I will be getting rid of the Democratic mascot and the Republican mascot and implement it the way it should have been, the bear and the eagle.
Thank you, Charles. Finally, James.
So when it comes to the cost of housing and all that kind of stuff, agree with a lot of what was said. First things first, Montana residents need to be given priority when it comes to housing, not out-of-staters. What I'd like to implement on the state side of things is a coming to Montana tax. Anyone that's moving to Montana from out of state pays an additional, say, 5–10%. That goes into a budget for the state to lower the cost of property taxes for Montana residents, and these out-of-staters continue to pay their due diligence for moving to the state for, say, 5 years or so until they legitimately become residents. Not only will this fund be able to reduce the actual taxes, it can be utilized for first-time home buyers who maybe they're struggling to be able to have enough money for the initial down payment, or maybe because of everything that's been going on, their credit's not where it needs to be. So it provides an option for them to transition from renting to home buying, to actually utilize some of this
funds from out-of-staters spiking everything up and use the out-of-state people moving to Montana and using the funds that they're so willingly, readily and able to provide to help lower the cost of housing and property throughout the state. Thank you.
Thank you to our Republican candidates. Now we move on to our independent candidate, Gary.
I'm a businessman and a capitalist, and probably take the most conservative view on this. I agree, though, I think it's the biggest single problem in Montana right now. Two things I wanted to interject. Years ago, I see Tom Tao is here. We created, almost 40 years ago, an in-state investment program at the Board of Investments. As I listen to hospital administrators, deans and chancellors of universities, I hear housing is the biggest problem. We have enough money in state pension funds, endowment funds, investment funds of hospitals, universities, et cetera, to create an in-state housing investment program of substantial size. And I think it's something that I plan to work on whether I get on the ballot or not. The other thing is that we have to stop, this appeals maybe more to the libertarians. Mobile home parks in this state have been bought and monopolized by seven out-of-state, mobile home parks have been monopolized by an out-of-state corporation. What bothers me is when these companies use Fannie Mae funds. I think Fannie Mae should be available to the mobile homeowners to buy their parks. That's a more of a capitalistic, realistic view, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Finally, we move on to our libertarian candidates. Sam, we'll start with you.
To me, equitable housing, which was one of the questions that was asked, means accepting and understanding that past generations of people of color and low income did not have the same opportunity as my ancestors. It does not mean a free ticket, but a helping hand and not a handout to get into the home ownership sphere. Montana currently has numerous federally assisted programs to address equitable housing. One is called Montana Housing, dealing with single-family homes funded under HUD and assist families with buying a home, down payment assistance, mortgage servicing, reverse annuity mortgages, which are for the elderly, rental housing assistance, multifamily rental development. Another program is the Home Investment Partnership Program, HOME, H-O-M-E. It's designed to create affordable housing for low-income families. The Department of Commerce provides the home funds to units of local government, counties and incorporated cities, and nonprofits throughout the state. The purpose is to improve the means of the state and local governments to implement strategies to achieve adequate and decent supplies of housing. What I often see as a real estate broker in Montana, not all the time, is good program availability, but a lack of aggressive outreach to the people who need the help. They often do not know where to go, but if contacted or informed, would gladly accept the help.
Yeah, there's nothing that government can do or should do that would bring housing prices down. In fact, everything that government would do to supposedly help, bring housing prices down will actually always bring prices up. And I'm listening to all these wonderful proposals. They're great ideas, different programs. They all will actually create higher prices. You know, the idea of having a police force to go around to see if a purchaser is a true Montanan or an out-of-stater. Folks, I'm a fourth-generation Montanan. I'm a real Montanan. I don't want a out-of-stater cop force. Are you kidding me? These will all cause prices to go up, not down. I know a guy in Livingston right now who's being prosecuted criminally for allowing some friends to live in his backyard in RVs. Okay, now in reality, in a libertarian world where you could actually solve the problem and have friends stay in RVs in your backyard, that would solve the problem. But you'll actually be in handcuffs. Government will come to you and will arrest you in Montana, and you'll go to jail with handcuffs on your wrists for trying to bring housing costs down. We need deregulation, get all these stupid programs off the books, and let people live freely, let them live together, live in rentals together, trailer parks, RV parks, RVs in your backyard, tents in your backyard. There was just an article in the Billings Gazette, I think yesterday, about prices of hotels. Those prices would all go down if there wasn't so much regulation.
Thank you. Thank you to our Libertarian candidates. Now we move on to our next rapid response question. Okay. On any given Saturday morning, where can we find you? This time, let's start on the right with Gary and finish with Charles.
In bed.
At work, downtown.
If it's early, it's feeding my dogs at home.
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
On any given Saturday morning, where can we find you?
Working on my house. I've been building a house for years, and I'm about halfway into a 30-year build.
Either puttering in the garden or in the garage if it's cold weather.
Well, if there's powder on the hills, obviously shredding it up at Red Lodge.
In bed or feeding the dogs?
Absolutely in bed. Depends on how early you're looking for me.
Thank you, guys. For our next long-form question is about voting. Young people in Montana vote at higher rates compared to young people in other states. However, here in Montana and across the nation, we continue to see laws that restrict or enact barriers to casting a ballot. What can Congress do to ensure Montanans have access to the ballot box? Starting out with our independent candidate this time, Gary, you have 90 seconds.
At the federal and state level, we have to quit attacking voters. All I see is restrictions. I don't see any enhancements for voting. And I think at the federal level, and I'm particularly bothered at the state level, which I would not be bashful to talk about, this last legislature really hurt Montana voters. I feel a little bit of it because Democrats and Republicans don't like independent candidates. And I think I should start a party like you guys, because I have to get 8,722 signatures, help me if you can, to even run. And it's become very difficult with a lot of changes. We've had 3 or 4 different directions from the Secretary of State in terms of how to even collect signatures. So those things have to stop. The attack on voters at all levels has to stop at the state and federal level.
Thank you, Gary. We'll move on to our Libertarian candidates. Roger, you have 90 seconds.
Yeah, the 2020 election was a disgrace, a national disgrace. I hear lots. I've run for Secretary of State as a Libertarian twice, and I've studied voting and voting integrity a lot. It can be absolutely 100% secure and 100% accessible, and I think everyone in this room would probably agree. We want 100% accessibility and 100% security. We want to ensure that each voter has exactly one vote, not more, not less. The deep state, you have to wonder, why are they trying so hard to make voting less secure? Okay, and they're doing it by denigrating minorities, denigrating blacks and natives, saying, well, they're not smart enough to get driver's licenses. Folks, you can make voting so secure, you don't need I don't believe in the driver's license, but I believe that you can have a picture taken of each voter, a thumbprint that's done all over the world. If you don't support that, and by the way, I'm leery of that myself, there are so many other ways. Serial numbers on ballots. You can break a stick and have the voter and the agency control the stick, and then they come and see if the stick matches. You can have 100% integrity without jeopardizing access at all. And what happened in 2020 was a disgrace. I never voted for Trump. No, I certainly never supported Trump, but in my eyes, it's very obvious what happened in Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, Philadelphia. It was stolen.
Thank you, Roger. Sam, you have 90 seconds.
There are 2 bills presently in Congress, and I support most of both of them, of the provisions. that would help keep voting open to young voters and minorities without resorting to baseless claims of fraud to support restriction. One is the Freedom to Vote Act, which addresses voter registration, access, election integrity, and security. It also provides for Election Day as a national federal holiday. The other is the John Lewis Act, which brings back portions of the 1965 Civil Rights Act that dealt with pre-clearance from the Justice Department when states made burdensome changes regarding qualifications of who gets to vote. If a state had so many civil rights violations in the previous 25 years, it would be subject to pre-clearance from the DOJ. As a member, I received from the American Bar Association a poll of a few weeks ago, and I support legislation codifying all of these following issues. And I've given you the poll percent number. 66% support creating a federal holiday for federal elections. 80% agree to expanding hours at polling stations. 79% want to have an ID before voting. 78% want to increase the number of polling places. 59% want increased use of drop boxes. And 58% want drive-through voting. I support policies that reflect voting should not be burdensome.
Thank you to our Libertarian candidates. We'll now move on to our Republican candidates. Charles, you have 90 seconds.
You know, we all have the right and opportunity to vote. Is that a lot better? Thank you. Your Indian name's coming real soon. Well, anyway, policies on voting. There should be really no major fights over people of the United States to be able to vote. If they have their Social Security card, if they have their ID, if they have their birth certificate. Division is started by accusations from one party to the next. We got to cut that out. I mean, folks, you got children in Congress right now, or you got Satan's angels in Congress, one of the two. But we have to unite and change what's coming. Otherwise, you aren't going to be voting, and your kids won't be voting. Think about that.
Thank you, Charles. Now we'll hear from James.
So first and foremost, I do believe that there needs to be some ID shown just to ensure that the people voting are U.S. citizens. In terms of the expanded voting hours, yeah, I'm all for that. Expand the voting hours so that voting polls are open 7 days a week to accommodate various working schedules. The voting holiday, absolutely in favor of that. I think that anything that we can do to increase the time and availability for votes to be cast and drive that voter engagement is something that we should be looking at. The whole election day portion, just like any other federal holiday, it would work the exact same way. Provide those that want to get out and vote the opportunity to do so without facing any sort of ramification from their employer or whatever it may be. And at the end of the day, I think that the election integrity does need to be kind of spruced up a little bit, and we deserve some accountability and transparency all across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And finally, we'll hear from Kyle.
All right, so this is kind of a hot topic for me because 2020, I didn't get a vote. As a pharmacist, I travel around Montana Monday through Friday, helping out Indian Health Services like in Poplar and Browning, and back to the farm Saturday, Sunday to do some farming. Well, absentee ballot got mailed out. They wouldn't leave it in the mailbox. They wouldn't forward it to my next address because I had mail forwarding. 2 days before the election, they call me up, and I'm in Billings, and they're like, your absentee got returned. I was like, when did it go out? A month ago. Well, you just called me now? And no way I could vote. And so it's kind of a hot topic for me. So should the polling places be open evenings and weekends for younger voters that go to school, have jobs, or anyone that's out of town working? Absolutely. There's at least the weekend before the election, have a weekend poll open. Now, we're in a digital age. So the question is, if every valid voter files a federal tax return like they are supposed to, why can't we just go onto the irs.gov and do our voting right there? Right off an app off our phone, right off the computer at your desk. So you don't have to worry about burning paper through the mail. You don't have to worry about stamps as a taxpayer. and you don't have to drive over to a polling place. I think that's the simple solution right there, folks. Thank you.
Thank you to our Republican candidates. Lastly, our Democratic candidates. Penny, we'll start with you. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. So, like Sam, I agree. I support the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Amendment Act, which are at the federal level. I also support and believe that what we have to have as part of that conversation, if we're talking about free and secure and safe elections, is that we do have to talk about voter suppression. We have to talk about cracking, we have to talk about redistricting, we have to talk about gerrymandering, we have to talk about packing districts and all of those things. So I think that those have to be part of the conversation as well. And I'm sorry, but voting is government. So I do believe in voting. I do think that it needs to be a federal holiday. And then one other thing I was going to say is I also believe in the investment of public education, because one of the best things we can do is make our electorate an educated electorate.
Thank you, Penny. Now, Skylar, you have 90 seconds.
I also support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I believe, for example, Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota in the 2020 election, she made it, I believe it was in September, she made it impossible for Native Americans that live on a reservation to vote in the election at all, 2 months before the 2020 election, because they said that they would not accept any address from the reservations as a valid address. They would not accept Native IDs. I don't see a valid reason to require IDs, but if we did, it needs to be all IDs. It needs to be student IDs, state, federal, passport, tribal IDs. I don't like this campaign against voting. If your party isn't popular, if your candidate isn't popular, and they're not getting the votes, don't run the candidate. Don't vote for the candidate. Voting is essential to a democracy. Democracy doesn't work if everyone stays quiet, if no one gets a say in it. I think a lot of the voting lines that we saw in 2020, people standing outside for days just to vote for their candidate. I think when you see that and you say make a voting day a national holiday, that's cool, but then 2 days later they're required to be back in work. I would support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Being able to vote by mail. I've voted by mail since I've been able to vote. I don't see a problem with it. I think we need more voting, not less of it.
Thank you to our Democratic candidates. Now we're going to move on to our next rapid answer question, beginning with Charles and ending with Gary again. Which nickname do you prefer, Big Sky Country or the Treasure State?
I would say Big Sky Country. Big Sky Country.
Big Sky Country.
Treasure State, just to be different, I guess.
I prefer the Treasure State.
Big Sky Country.
Big Sky.
Big Sky Country.
Awesome. Moving on to our last long form. Oh my God. Last long form is, okay, whatever.
Next question.
Next question is about discrimination. If elected, what federal policies, if any, would you support to prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression? This time we'll start with our Republican candidates. James, you have 90 seconds.
So first and foremost, any sort of discrimination is something that should be just put to the wayside. It doesn't matter if it's gender, race, religion, political belief, gender expression, whatever it is. People should be based on the content of their character, not by any other affiliation or whatever aspect you want to put them in a category with. Growing up, I was taught and raised that the content of your character is what matters, and there isn't anything else, any sort of category that people can put you in that is going to trump that. Who you are as a person is what matters most. If you're a good person, awesome. If you're not, there you go.
Thank you, James. Kyle, we'll hear from you now.
All right, so the U.S. Constitution, right? It seems like we kind of forget about it once in a while, but separation of church and state. That's all this is about. We need to separate church and state. The government's there for everyone, no matter who you are, and that's what the government is. These people that bring in their personal views and they want to hate other people either because they feel offended or they want to feel better, that's wrong. That needs to be left out of our government. That's my answer, short and sweet. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Finally, Charles.
So Kyle, do I get the rest of your minute and 30 seconds?
Yes.
Wonderful. You know, we as human beings have got to quit thinking with our mind, think with our heart. If we look at the Constitution, like Baby Max was saying, let's go back to 1776 and the Bill of Rights in that Constitution. We shouldn't need any policies regarding discrimination if we follow that document. If we have respect for one another, regardless of color, regardless of sexual preference. Shoot, when Jesus Christ came, he didn't say I'm black, I'm white, I'm gay, I'm normal. He said love one another. That's what we have to do as a country if we're going to survive. Stop and think about that. I have respect for each and everybody. And their sexual preference, no problem. Color, no problem. Because when I leave this world, I'm going to be like that light. And if you're stuck in the human mind, you may never be part of that light. We got to love one another. That's simple.
Thank you to our Republican candidates. We'll move on to our Democratic candidates. Skylar, you first, and then Penny.
The intro of this question was to what would we propose as legislation, or?
What federal?
Federal policies, yeah. I believe it's shameful that we have to have any kind of policies about this. You shouldn't have to be told that it's bad to discriminate. You know, it's like the form of the term nationalism. All it does is really teach you to hate people that you ain't never met before. You may not like someone personally. That doesn't really give you the right to just their ethnicity, their culture, their sexual orientation, their gender, anything like that. If you don't like an opinion, you don't like an opinion, that's fine. I don't know. I would have to talk with a lot of other groups and see what legislation there is. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But yeah, I do want protection for people to express themselves, whether through gender, sexually, orally, anything. I believe that everybody has the right and freedom of speech. So you should be able to say and do anything that you want.
As the lone female on the panel, I know a little bit about equality. I know a little bit about fighting for my reproductive rights. I know a little bit about fighting for equality within my body than the other genders, the other gender. So at the federal level, I support the Equality Act. This bill prohibits discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity in areas including public accommodations and facilities, education, federal funding, employment, housing, credit, and the jury system. Specifically, the bill defines and includes sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity among the prohibited categories of discrimination or segregation. This bill expands the definition of public accommodations to include places or establishments that provide 1, exhibitions, recreation, exercise equipment, exercise, amusement, gatherings or displays, goods, services, and programs, and transportation and services. I agree, we shouldn't have to fight for equality, but in the history of our government, women have had to, females have had to. Anyone who's not a white heterosexual Christian male has had to fight for equality under the law, and we will continue to have to do that until we understand that representation matters.
Thank you to our Democratic candidates. Now we'll move on to our Libertarian candidates. Roger, you have 90 seconds.
I'll extol the virtues of the Libertarian Party right now. The Libertarian Party was the first major party. Of course, we're the third largest party, but we were the first party to call for recognition of gay marriage, gay rights. It was in our first platform in 1972. The Libertarian Party led the way long before the Democrats. You know, she just talked about the struggle, the fight. The Libertarian Party led the fight long before Democrats ever did for gay rights, the right to gay marriage, all of these advances. You know, and there are these current, you could say, controversies swirling, such as the NCAA athletes and these kinds of things. I would say my position as a member of Congress would be that government has no role in regulating the NCAA. It is a nonprofit, private organization. It's not for us to decide. It's not for U.S. senators or U.S. congressmen to decide which person gets to swim in a swimming pool or the Olympic event or whatever. It was disgraceful years ago when the Major League Baseball players were called before congressional committees and asked if they used steroids. It's not. Major League Baseball is a private nonprofit. Government should have no role in this. So my position is pure libertarian. These aren't things for the government. There's nothing the government should do, nothing that Congress should do. Now this leaves open a little bit of a window for private sector, I don't know, differences of opinion on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Sam, you have 90 seconds.
I support any legislation prohibiting discrimination based on any sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. I support the Equality Act, Fair and Equal Housing Act of 2021, and Jury Non-Discrimination Act, just to name a few. My commitment and support of the LGBTQIA+ community has been constant, reliable, and genuine, and will continue to be. I'm done with that, but I got two things. Gary, when I ran for an independent years ago, I had to get 16,000 signatures.
Quit my whining.
I know. And I hope they come up with a shorter acronym. It's acceptable.
Thank you to our Libertarian candidates, and finally our independent candidate. Gary, you have 90 seconds.
Okay. We've talked about big bad corporations, and I am one. I own one. It's amazing to me how corporate America and business is taking the lead on anti-discrimination. If you look at Florida and Texas, which I think is the most disgraceful, mean politics from the two governors there, and you look at Walt Disney and the attack on Walt Disney, who dared to support lesbians and gays, and I think a lot of corporate and business America really would support federal policies that avoid discrimination. And I think we deserve some credit for that. Notice who is supporting, opposing the Roe Wade decision. I'm a businessman. I think it's one of the most dangerous things around. I believe in the absolute right to privacy. I think our Constitution, thanks to some folks that created the Constitution, is the best Constitution in the country. And right to privacy means stay the hell out of lesbian, gays, and other folks' lives, and stay out of women's lives, period.
Thank you, Gary. Finally, we move on to our last final rapid response question. What is your favorite small, less than 10,000 residents, eastern Montana town? Let's start on the right with Gary and finish with Charles.
I love Clyde Park.
I like Levine, Montana. They have a lot of solar panels there.
So I have to say Livingston because I used to live in Livingston, but I will say that I just recently visited Fort Benton. Oh my gosh, if you have not been to Fort Benton, get there this summer. Do not hesitate, drive there quickly, get to Fort Benton.
Wow, I'd say Cook City, is that in the eastern? Oh, yeah. All right, I like Cook City. Wonderful little mountain town. Technically, it's the coldest town by average in Montana.
I don't know if it would be considered small, but Lewistown, and if not Lewistown, something like Alzada.
You know, I was going to say Lewistown also, but I was going to tell you guys first, don't tell the Californians, otherwise we'll have Los Angeles all over again. But yeah, Lewistown's my favorite.
I personally love Belt. It's a nice small little town, kind of tucked away. And for anyone listening, stay away from it.
I would have to say Lewistown.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all of our candidates for your thoughtful answers. I learned a lot, and I hope the audience did too. And I'll be passing it on to Karen Miller for our audience Q&A.
Hello all, I am Karen Miller. I use pronouns she, her, and I am so honored to get to facilitate the audience Q&A. So just so you know, throughout the forum, folks have been submitting questions on these notes. We will not have enough time to get through all these questions. So we really do encourage you to reach out to all of these candidates and ask them your own personal questions, get all the information that you would want and need to make a well-informed and educated decision and vote. All right, candidates, this is going to go quick. So you each have 1 minute to answer a question from the audience. We're going to go left to right, right to left. Gary, we're going to start with you and then go down to Charles. Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Now that the Supreme Court is poised to overturn Roe v. Wade, if elected to Congress, will you vote to ensure the right to access abortion continues regardless of the Supreme Court's decision?
Yes.
Skylar, we'll go to you.
Absolutely. Roe v. Wade needs to be codified as soon as possible before the Supreme Court gets a chance to overturn it at all.
Thanks, Skylar. Penny?
Absolutely. Reproductive health care is everyone's right. It is a human right, whether you are male or female. Females should not be burdened overly so than males when it creates both sexes to create a pregnancy, and yet females carry the entire burden of that legally. Until we are ready to actually regulate male reproductivity and create equality among the reproductive rights of the genders, absolutely, Roe v. Wade needs to stay 100% law.
Thanks, Penny. Roger?
Yeah, it's funny. I first read the Roe v. Wade decision in law school, and I thought it was absolutely the greatest. It's a great decision, and I wish the Supreme Court would decide every case like they did with Roe v. Wade. They start with asking the question, well, what was the law in 1791? And they start with that. It was a perfect originalist opinion by the Supreme Court. So I've always been pro-choice, and I'm pro-choice on everything. Now, I recently had a friend who said, did you read the Alito draft? And I didn't, so I went and I read it. Very well written, I want to say. It's a good draft. It hasn't changed it hasn't changed me fundamentally, but I urge all of you to go and read the Roe v. Wade opinion. Very, very succinct, well written. Then read the Alito draft. These are very well written. These are, I'll just say, you got to hand it to them. They've thought these things out in every which way. But I am pro-choice, and I think Roe v. Wade was rightly decided.
Thanks, Roger. We're going to go with Sam.
I support Roe v. Wade, but it looks like it's going to get overturned. It needs to be codified, which is what they're working on. And as an attorney, I know that it was the Roe v. Wade was based on one of the amendments to the Constitution after the Civil War, the 14th Amendment. And it guarantees the right of privacy, and that's what this Roe decision. So it's, like I say, I think it could get better traction, and I would vote for codification if it comes up.
Thanks, Sam. Kyle.
So Roe v. Wade was definitely a history turner, and I'm kind of a history guy. I studied history a lot, and I encourage a lot of people to go study history because history always repeats itself. So if we go back to where abortion is illegal, we're going to have many health problems, many health problems. It's great where it's at. Leave it alone.
let the choice of abortion be between the mother and the physician. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. James?
So I'm kind of half in the middle of pro-life and pro-choice. I see the points on both sides. I think that what we need to do is focus a little bit more on responsibility. And Penny's comment about the male reproductive side, I'd be remiss if I didn't input my wife's opinion. She agrees. And I think that for guys that are just out there playing around and not ready to take responsibility for their actions, there you go. They've got that option. And when it comes to the choices to even prevent the abortion situation, I think that we need to, as a society, take responsibility first and foremost of our decisions. So I think Roe v. Wade, as it stands currently, should be maintained with maybe a few adjustments to hold some accountability there.
All right, thanks. And lastly, Charles.
Now, your hair is going to stand up. In the Native American community in the 1950s, they suffered oppression. One of my relatives didn't get an abortion. My cousin was our people. Now, I am pro-life, and I don't think that the government should discriminate or shouldn't get involved in a woman's right to choose. I think the government needs to stay out of it and leave it up to the woman. And that's got to be respected, just like sexual gender preference. Got to be wise about this.
All right, thank you. Okay, for our next question, Charles, we're going to start with you and then work our way back.
Elders rule. That's just like God's rule. Remember that. Never before was the rule of God.
You want to rock, paper, scissors me for it?
The rule of law used until the Seneca natives explained that to the founding forefathers, who were the average age of 25.
Well, I tell you what, we all know that you are younger than Gary Buchanan, right? We can all acknowledge that. So we know
Yeah, but
that
look
you're
at Larry.
younger.
Anytime he starts to get red, he looks like an Indian. And I'm trying to figure out which which band he's with.
You two can talk about that after. That'd be fun.
Okay,
I'll listen
all right.
in.
Go ahead, ask the question.
Okay. Do you believe college debt should be forgiven? Why or why not?
Well, you know what? That's a big issue, and I'm glad you brought that up. In 1980, the late 80s, early 90s, they said every Native American should get an education. They went off, got these loans. I've known several of them. Several of them got teaching degrees, got social work degrees. Went to apply in urban areas. We're told, why don't you go back to the reservation? Or isn't there an opening there? Can't you go back and help your community? I will tell you what, you take all the urban cities in Montana, not one Native American school teacher. I know 8 Native American women and men who got teaching degrees, don't even have a job and can't even pay that back. So they should honor what's in the treaty, free education for Native Americans, or they should start hiring some teachers in municipalities that are Native American.
Thanks, Charles. James?
So as tempting as it would be to have loans forgiven, I think that that would cause a little bit more damage in the way of the inflation side of things with the amount of money that would go into it. And from someone that's still paying off student loans, that's kind of tough for me to say. But I think that the biggest kind of issue that needs to be addressed is the cost of education for colleges, universities. That's just become very outrageous. So we need to create actual costs that are affordable for anyone to be able to get an education. And we shouldn't be creating any barriers to prevent someone from going from high school graduation to getting a college education and beginning their career.
Thanks, James. Kyle?
So yeah, going to pharmacy school for 6 years, I kind of racked up a lot of debt. You know, that University of Montana likes their money. But it took me a while to pay off my loans, but they're low interest, they're small payments over the year, but I appreciated it. It was my investment into my education. It was my investment into the future. So me making that payment made me harness and own my degree. It wasn't just given to me. I think if we forgive student debt, people are going to forget the hard work they put into their degree. It's not like they have to make this big payment tomorrow and they're going to be in debt. No, these student loans, they carry out for a long time. So let's make the students pay, be financially responsible, and respect the degree that they went to school for. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Sam?
This is a very awkward and contentious issue for all of us to decide what to do. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You got the loan. You need to pay it off. But there's a lot of hurt on those people that have that burden that hurts the country. So I'm kind of in the middle. I support some kind. I know it'll be a nightmare to administratively administer, but some kind of a vetting of, obviously the physicians don't need any help with their student loans. But the teachers, the people that are service people, should somehow be vetted, and there has to be some kind of a stair step or a graduation of some help, but I don't think all of it ever. So I don't have the answer, but it's very difficult. But we need to deal with it.
All right, thanks, Sam. And Roger?
No, I do not think they should be forgiven, but I do think they should be treated like other debts. In other words, dischargeable in bankruptcy on a case-by-case basis. For people who can't pay, and there's a lot of them, they should be able to go into bankruptcy court just like credit card debt, et cetera. But no, they shouldn't just be blanket discharged.
All right, great. Penny?
So when I first went to college out of high school, it was one price. I went back to school in my 30s and got my undergraduate degree, went and got my master's degree in my 40s, and went to law school in my 50s. I will be paying student loans till I'm 100. I can tell you that it is radically different in cost. And we've just been answering questions all night long about housing, affordability, wages, equity. And yet we have students that are leaving colleges which they're not guaranteed a job with that degree. They're no longer guaranteed that. And yet we're having students leave colleges with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and we're wondering why they can't afford a house. We're wondering why they can't afford rent. We're wondering why they're not moving in the direction with that degree, because there's probably not a job with that degree. There's not a wage that's accommodating that. So it is a hard question, but I do think it's one that we absolutely have to get to the table and discover what the solution is.
Great, thanks, Penny. Skylar?
I do support getting rid of all student debt. Forgiving it all. I support free college. I support free health care, education. I believe it is the duty of this country to take care of its citizens. Charles and I, being Native American, I can attend MSUB for free. Does not cost me a dime. Between the FAFSA and the Native American Indian waiver, I can attend it for free. I don't know why it's free for me, but too expensive for you. Our health care is the same. Any reservation in the United States we go to, totally free. Does not matter. We get free health care. Job Corps is a federal program that is completely free. They pay you for going there. They pay for your travel. They pay for your tools, everything. You get a free education. I believe that we need to take all of the kickbacks and everything that a lot of these for-profit colleges get. We need to take all of them out in terms of grants, FAFSAs. We need to invest them in federal education. Those colleges will still be there if you want. If you want to rack up $30,000 in debt, be my guest. But I don't believe you should be punished financially for bettering your city, your county, your state, your country. You don't become a doctor for selfish reasons. So I do support that.
Thanks, Skylar. All right, lastly, Gary.
I'm an ex-chairman of the Montana Banking Board, and I was chairman during a tough period. I'm against forgiving student loans. A loan is a loan, a bond is a bond. My business would not exist if people would forgive loans on a regular basis. However, I think student counselors starting in their senior year of high school should be counseling people about debt, talking about what kinds of jobs that you pay for. And I think the university system itself, and I've talked to my son who's on the Board of Regents, needs to do a much better job of counseling students on debt. I am for restructuring. There are lots of ways to restructure debt. I did it on the banking board, but I am completely against forgiving debt.
All right, thank you, Gary. Okay, you can hold on to that mic, Gary, because we're going to go with you and then back down to Charles. Okay. What do you think are solutions to racism embedded in our police forces across Montana and the United States?
Well, I've either led or supported the last 4 mill levies for the public safety in Billings. And I feel very strongly about training. I feel very strongly about recruitment of minorities. But I also think we need more cops. And that's one of the, I've worked downtown for 43 years. And I think we need to continue to support the police. Absolutely, I think the concept of defunding the police has really hurt the Democratic Party. And I think we need to support police, but I think we need a tremendous increase in training. It's a very difficult job, and mistakes can be made regularly. And for training, better management, but funding for more police.
Thank you. Skylar.
I would agree with Gary. More training is needed. I think we should be hiring a lot more people of color as well in the police force, a lot more women, a lot more. We need an entire group of people. You know, you're not going to have somebody who knows what policing is like on the reservation versus in Billings, Montana. You know, in Havre, in Sydney. You need more engagement. You need more accountability as well. Every time these officers have an issue with racism, every time they're caught on the body cam saying a derogatory term, calling somebody a derogatory term, they need to be punished. There needs to be accountability. We need better police officers, not substandard ones.
Thanks, Skylar. Penny.
So when I was on Billings City Council, one of the last initiatives I got passed was a Citizens Police Advisory Board. One of the things that's on that initiative that we got passed, which is a 4-year advisory term, is that one of the things that they are empowered to do is work with Chief St. John to hire more Native Americans and females on the Billings Police Force. So that was one of the big issues that we got passed. This was a big conversation, same with Gary. I fully support funding the police. I work in the area of human trafficking. I can tell you what will happen if we start defunding the police. That just is something I am absolutely opposed to. But I do believe in training. That was the other thing that happens within that Citizens Police Advisory Board is we increase our cultural training. And I think that those are really good things that we can put into place. And there's the 8 Can't Wait. That's something we put into place in Billings. If you don't know about 8 Can't Wait, I encourage you to look at that.
Thank you, Penny. Roger.
I'm the administrator of the Defund the Police Facebook page, and I've advocated for decades we need massive cuts to law enforcement budgets. Cut, cut, cut. I wrote a law review article years ago called Are Cops Constitutional? I studied the constitutional history of police. There never was a police force until the 1830s. So the Founding Fathers wrote and drafted the Constitution and the Bill of Rights without an actual professional police force anywhere. At that time, the original understanding, the original constitutional order was for citizens to have more law enforcement duties, citizens' arrests. There were sheriffs, of course. There were deputies here and there. But this massive police force that we see today would have been, but the Founding Fathers would have considered it, what do they call it, a standing army. And it needs to be defunded. We need massive budget cuts, massive budget cuts.
All right, thank you, Roger.
Well, I completely disagree with my friend Roger. They don't need budget cuts. What they need, and it's simple, the people on the street, trooper, deputy, or policeman, they need more money. That's the simple answer. They need more money. As a real estate broker, I couldn't believe in the last 50 years I've been selling real estate that I would go and see a house and find out that a policeman lived there. it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. They should be getting more money.
Thank you, Sam. Kyle.
So it goes back to not necessarily education, but professionalism. So, like as a pharmacist or a doctor, you make an oath of professionalism. And same thing with the police officers. They need to have that oath of professionalism out there. And then when you get that one bad egg, that is racist, it ruins all of them. So everybody goes out saying every cop is bad. In the pharmacy world, there's bad pharmacists out there. And that one bad pharmacist makes me look bad. So in Montana, I grew up in Havre, Montana, right between 3 reservations. My Native Americans are my neighbors. I understand that. With police officers, if they come in from out of state, never grew up, I would say send them up to a reservation, let them work side by side with an IHS cop, and learn the culture. That's where we're going to win with this situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. James.
So I also agree that defund the police is not going to help anything. I think that first and foremost, personal opinion on the Montana police officers, troopers that I've interacted with, I've got to tip my hat to them. They've been some of the best that I've come in contact with. In terms of the actual funding, I think that the training and the resources definitely needs to be made available. The more higher quality police officers that we have that are able to deal with different situations, de-escalation, you name it, the better results we're going to have. The other aspect is on the reservations, we need to be able to fund IHS and implement some more tribal police to help curb the crime that is going on all over the reservations throughout the U.S.
All right, thanks, James. And last but not least, Charles.
Well, I hope I don't turn you all into Native Americans, because you tend to change color when you're faced with a real serious issue. But anyway, I believe in law and order. I believe that we need police officers. I believe that we need to pay them fairly. But I believe that we need police officers with a high integrity. Take a look at the prison system of the state of Montana. 70% Native American, and we will make up 6% of the population. 70%. That's unfair. Look at the amount of teachers in the urban centers. I mean, there's a lot of issues that we need to cover. We need to set a pay salary that's good for teachers, that's good for police officers, and we need to change the type of policing that is performed. They're just under a lot of stress too.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles. So unfortunately, that is all the time we have for audience Q&A. Please, 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 we encourage you to take advantage of being Montanans and having access to candidates running to represent you. Please reach out to them with additional questions that you have. And of course, go and vote for the primaries on June 7th. And now I get to welcome back Perry Kemick for closing.
Wow. I love conflict, so I think that was just really fun to watch you guys. I really do. I think it was just so fun to watch you guys be in conflict with one another, but in a really respectful way. It was really fun to watch. I really appreciate you all being honest with your answers and just giving this crowd here a chance to see what you guys are all about. So that concludes Forward Montana's Congressional Primary Forum. Thank you all so much for joining us in Billings. Again, I think it was a big feat to get all 8 of you in a room together. So definitely a hand for our candidates, to our moderators. All of our volunteers, a huge thank you to the beautiful Art House Cinema and Pub, to Keller Paulson for all his help tonight. Thank you. So just a couple quick reminders as we head out. If you have moved since you last registered to vote, if you just turned 18 or you want to become a very first-time voter, you have to register to vote, obviously. The close of regular voter registration actually is tomorrow, Monday, May 9th. So after tomorrow, you have to go in person to the county elections office in Yellowstone County. It's just a few blocks from here. If you're elsewhere, you can Google where that's at, and you must go in person to register. And as a result of the preliminary injunction on House Bill 176, you can currently still register to vote up until polls close on Election Day, but it is subject to change. So check out forwardmontana.org, and we're going to have up-to-date information. For folks who are registered as absentee voters, ballots are actually going to be mailed on Monday, May 13th, not far from now. If you don't get your ballot by May 20th, go ahead and check in with your local county elections office. And for folks who are registered poll voters, you can vote at your polling place on Tuesday, June 7th. And all ballots must be received by your county elections office by 8 p.m. on Tuesday, June 7th. And make sure you mail it back by May 31st, my birthday. So do it for me, please. 7 days before the election, or drop it off in person to ensure it gets there. And if you're wanting to help Forward Montana get out this dang vote, please go to the table back there where my coworkers are, sign up to volunteer with Forward Montana. We'd love to have you help us get out the vote. And finally, lastly, just another thank you to everyone for kind of being willing to change it up with us and remember Mark Sweeney today and honor him, and to all the candidates for showing up even in the wake of this tragedy. I know that it's, again, just a feat to get all of you here. I really respect all of you for joining us today, being able to give your opinions, and I just am so thankful that all of you chose to spend your evening with Forward Montana and these candidates. So thank you. Have a good night.